Tēnā tātou katoa, kia tīmata tō tātou hui ki te karakia mō tēnei pō. Nā reira kia inoi tātou. Tuku a te wairua kia rereki nā taumata, hei arahi ia tātou mahi i tēnei ahi pō. Me tātou whai i nā tikana a rātou mā. Kia mau, kia ita, kia kore ai e naro, tuturu ōwhiti kia whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. Taka mai hea te pō o te rangi, taka mai i runga i nā mauna e, i tā koto mai i runga i nā marae tapu o te ika nui, o te ika roa, te ika mau i tiki a taranga e tā koto nei. Haerera e te mana o Ngati Puna, te kuru o te marama, ka taupoki te waka, ki raro rā ka taupoki. Nā reira koutou kia koutou, tātou te hunaura kia tātou, e tau nei i tēnei pō, tēnā koutou. E aku nui, e aku rahi, te huna e pēhi nei i nā tūmomo māuwi tana o tēnei ao, ara te mate korona. E au kati nei a tātou ki o tātou kāinga, kei te aroha atu. Ko te tūmanako a tōna wā ka kitea he huarahi e hoki haere tātou ki te nohotahi, ki te kaitahi, ki te kite tātou ia tātou a kua nei. Nā reira kia tahuri atu tātou ki te kaupapa matua o te ahi pōnei, ara te whakanui i nā kaiwhiwhi o te ao tuhituhi mō te tau 2020 mātahi. Kia ake ki te whakatau kira ko te amo Rangi ki mua, ana ko koutou i nei nā kaiwhiwhi. Nā whitu mārama e whakanui ana i tēnei pō. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka whiua te rākau kia koe e pō.
E nā mana, e nā reo, e nā tōpito o te motu. Tēnā koutou katoa. Haniko, tēnā koe. For opening our event this evening. I look forward to hearing from you later as well. We're fortunate to have platform interpreting New Zealand with us this evening. Kelly and Josh will be signing the conversation. Thank you both. I'm Paul Diamond, your host for this evening's online panel event. Tonight is about celebrating the 2021 winners of the Prime Minister's Awards for Literary Achievement and the 2021 Creative New Zealand Michael King Writers' Fellowship. This year in poetry, we have Anne Kennedy, in fiction, David Hill, and in non-fiction, Dame Claudia Orange. We also have the pleasure of Monty Soutar joining us as the recipient of the 2021 Michael King Writers' Fellowship, which is awarded biennially. Congratulations and welcome to you all and to our viewers joining us virtually. We'll get to the individual achievements shortly, but what unites all of tonight's winners are just that they are all distinguished writers and leaders in their fields, often in multiple fields. They're based in the north, the west, the east, and the south of Te Kaupapa. They know their backyards intimately, and they have a national and global perspective. The latter from that time not long ago when we could all travel and immerse ourselves in overseas experiences. And as Haniko said in his opening for tonight's event, hopefully we'll be back to having the opportunities to do that again before too long. And while the recipients this evening, their literary and historical contributions span decades and combined amount to well over a century of output, they each place great importance on the needs of our rangatahi as teachers and as writers for young people. Now, as some of you may know, each year the Prime Minister's Awards for Literary Achievement were established in 2003, organised by Creative New Zealand. And the awards celebrate writers from Aotearoa who've made a significant contribution to New Zealand literature in the genres of fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. The winner of each category receives $60,000. Each year, New Zealanders are invited to nominate their choice of a New Zealand writer, and writers are also able to nominate themselves for these awards. The Creative New Zealand Michael King Writers' Fellowship is awarded every 2 years, as I've mentioned. Both the fellowship and the awards are usually celebrated with an in-person awards ceremony where these outstanding writers can be acknowledged amongst their peers and presented with certificates by the Prime Minister herself. Sadly, as we know, COVID slightly impacted our plans, so instead we have an online panel with these prestigious writers. While we would have loved nothing more than to celebrate in person, this online event allows for people to join us virtually wherever they are and take part by submitting their questions via the comments thread on Facebook and YouTube. So please be sure to do this. So just to give you a quick overview of how this will work this evening, we'll soon hear from the Prime Minister herself, and then Arts Council Chair Caren Rangi. Then I'll have a brief chat with each of the four writers, and they'll each read an excerpt from their own work. Following this, I'll open the floor to you, the viewers, and direct your questions to the writers. Before we move on, I'd like to take a moment to thank Auckland Live for making this event possible, and to our partner, The Big Idea. And thanks to our co-hosts, Unity Books. We'd be usually having this panel event in their Wellington store. Now, the Prime Minister herself has frequently noted that these awards are an annual highlight for her, and she was disappointed that she couldn't do the usual celebration event in person. So on that note, I'll introduce our first guest, the Right Honourable Josepha, Prime Minister of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Kia ora koutou katoa. I'm very excited to offer my congratulations to Anne Kennedy, David Hill and Dame Claudia Orange, the winners of this year's Prime Minister's Awards for Literary Achievement. Thank you to Dame Claudia for your work to improve awareness, knowledge and understanding of the Treaty of Waitangi and a wider understanding of New Zealand history. David, for your prolific and much loved writing, not only fiction but poetry, stories for stage, columns and more. And Anne, for your extraordinary breadth of creative writing, ambitious and lyrical writing, and support of others in the sector through your mentoring and advice. Congratulations to you all. Alongside these three accomplished writers, we're also recognising the 2021 Creative New Zealand Michael King's Writers' Fellowship winner, historian Dr. Monty Soutar, who'll create an ambitious series of New Zealand historical novels that address the impact of colonisation in Aotearoa, each told from a Māori perspective. This fellowship is a very special one, given that it's named after the great New Zealand historian Michael King, one of the first winners of the Prime Minister's Awards for Literary Achievement. These awards are an annual highlight for me personally, and I know it's disappointing that we aren't gathering together in person to celebrate. It's disappointing for me at least. However, this evening's online panel is an exciting opportunity to gather virtually and to honour the winners for their ongoing and outstanding contributions to New Zealand literature. I'm personally delighted to be able to acknowledge these wonderful writers who have made such an important contribution to New Zealand literature. These awards recognise that as we grapple with questions about how we want to be as a society and what we want our future to look like, literature holds an important place in our lives and our cultural imagination. I look forward to meeting Dame Claudia, David, Anne, and Monty in person and celebrating their achievements together. In the meantime, I hope you all enjoy this online discussion and the chance to hear the work of these wonderful writers.
Terrific to hear there from the Prime Minister, and some wonderful words shared about Anne, Dame Claudia, David and Monty. Now, to introduce our second guest of the evening, Caren Rangi, Chair of the Arts Council of New Zealand, Toi Aotearoa. Over to you, Caren. Kia ora ana, tēnā koe.
Kia ora ana koutou katoa, tēnā tātou katoa, and welcome to everybody watching online for tonight for what is a real treat to have such an esteemed group of New Zealand writers here, and we celebrate them this evening. So firstly to Anne, to David, to Dame Claudia, on behalf of the Arts Council of New Zealand, Toi Aotearoa, we're really thrilled to offer our congratulations to you as the 2021 recipients of the Prime Minister's Literary Achievement Awards. And of course, also honouring our Dr. Monty Soutar, the recipient of the 2021 Creative New Zealand Michael King Writers Fellowship. Tēnā koe, Monty. And thank you again to the wonderful Paul Diamond for leading this kōrero tonight, and also with the support of Kelly and Shosh from Platform Interpreting New Zealand. And having you guys here helps us ensure that the deaf community can also experience and engage with this important event. As the Chair of the Arts Council, Toi Aotearoa, my very first official engagement this year was with the 2020 version of these awards. And we honoured those winners at Premier House. Unfortunately, this year, COVID has again foiled our plans for an in-person ceremony. But as the Prime Minister said, She and we are as well looking forward to that chance of getting in the same room with all of you and celebrating you in person, hopefully in the new year. It is disappointing that we can't gather in person to celebrate, but you know, we adapt. And one of the great things about having this online event is that it makes it accessible for so many more New Zealanders to come and celebrate all of you and your literary achievements. And just a reminder, as Paul said earlier on, to all of you watching, you have a chance to ask your questions of our writers later on in this evening. These awards are really important to us at Creative New Zealand. They're a special way to celebrate the value that our writers bring to Aotearoa New Zealand. And what a lineup we have. It's an honour to be able to recognise all of you as innovative leaders in your respective fields, and thank you for your commitment to New Zealand literature. I'm very much looking forward to hearing everyone read and discuss their work this evening. Again, don't forget about your questions. I've got a few myself that I might slip through later on. But finally, I'd like to thank Auckland Live, who've helped to make this event possible, and our partners, Sam and the crew from The Big Idea. I hope you will enjoy this online panel kōrero this evening and hearing more about the work of Anne, Dame Claudia, David and Monty. Back to you now, Paul.
Thanks for joining us, Caren, and for those warm words of congratulations. Now let's turn to the people who this evening is all about, Anne, Dame Claudia, David and Monty. Claudia, if I could start with you, what was your reaction when you got the call from Creative New Zealand to let you know you'd won this award?
I had to sit down very quickly. I had just recovered from that virus RSV and I was a bit weak anyway. So I was really quite gobsmacked when I heard the news. It was quite special too, of course, and such an amazing award, totally unexpected.
And given the focus of your work on Treaty of Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, I guess, is that in your thoughts as well, that this is an opportunity for the challenges that you put in your work to be in the spotlight as part of this award?
Well, it is. And of course, that's rather nerve-wracking, Paul, because you hope that you have done well when in your research and your accuracy. Very much, though, I think historians work as building blocks. And over the years, there have been many historians that have contributed and helped me feel more confident in what I'm saying. And particularly, a little bit like David Hill, I'm keen that what you write is understandable and accessible to the younger audiences. I feel that's extremely important.
Kia ora. Thank you, Claudia. Now, well, you've mentioned David. Turning to you now, David. When you were made the New Zealand Society of Authors President of Honour in 2019, you said there were sort of 5 stages of acceptance. You sort of were inspired by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And you said it was incredulity, apprehension, anxiety, repositioning, and pleasure and gratitude. Has it been a bit like that again, winning this award?
Very much so, I think, Paul. Condensed into a smaller space, I stood by the window holding the phone and muttering, oh my goodness, over and over again. I would have liked to be, I think, much more eloquent. But yes, like Claudia, a sense of great pleasure and a validation, a feeling that people must to some extent believe in me. And I think that makes you write better for a while. You feel a little more confident. You feel a little more hopeful of your chances.
And you've written all sorts of different types of writing, but you're really well known for your writing for children and young adults. And I guess this is also great to acknowledge. I've always thought, you know, we punch above our weight in a lot of ways in those areas of writing. And it's great to have that spotlighted as well with you winning this award, do you think?
Yes, I think Creative New Zealand, in terms of the Prime Minister's Awards, has been splendid in terms of the number of children's writers they've acknowledged. Tessa Duda last year, Margaret Mahi, of course, Joy Cowley, Paula Green in poetry. So I'm grateful for and appreciative of the way that children's and young adult writers have been acknowledged.
Great company there. Anne, moving to you in the north. What has the experience of being told you're the winner of this award in lockdown been like? Has that made celebration muted or difficult for you?
It's Tēnā koe Paul and tēnā koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. I'm ashamed to say I was a sort of weeping mess when Malcolm Burgess from Creative New Zealand called me, and I still sort of can't believe it. It was very unexpected for me. So Paul, I'd just like to take a moment firstly to congratulate Dame Claudia and David. I just feel like I'm in the best possible company, so huge congratulations to both. And also to say thank you to the Prime Minister, Creative New Zealand, the people who nominated me for this, and also Auckland University Press, who published my poetry over the years, which means having a deep sort of editing relationship, and that's important. I just feel so lucky to receive something so generous, and also lucky to live in a country where the state supports the arts, because it doesn't happen everywhere. But it's crucial if other things apart from commerce are going to be a driving force in the arts. It means so much to me as a writer. I guess it sort of means something has been read, and I never take that for granted. I think I don't think I would keep producing, like writing out there if I didn't feel part of something bigger. And that's the poetry scene, or scenes in Aotearoa. There's so much going on. It's so inspiring and supportive and challenging and fun. And that's why I'm here. So thank you, koutou, very much.
Kia ora, Anne. Yes, you're right. Just aha ko te aha, despite what we're experiencing at the moment, there is just a lot going on, and that's worth celebrating. Heading to the east, ki te tai rāwhiti, Monty, tēnā koe. It's always special when the winner of the Michael King Writers' Fellowship is able to be part of these awards. How's things going with your sideways move from military history into historical fiction? How's that trilogy of novels going?
O tūtai Paul, me hatea kia Haniko I whakapore tō tātou. Hoi, me te mihi ki a koe, kia Toi Aotearoa me te hunga e whakarongo mai nā tēnā koutou katoa. Well, it's a challenge. I always try and explain it to people. Given my background, it's like being a rugby player, but all of a sudden you got to learn to play soccer and you've never played it before. So it's taking a lot of practice. I'm really grateful that I've got a publisher, and I'm working with an editor, and she's really helping me through this. So it's probably been about a year teaching myself how to write fiction, but I'm getting there.
And are you doing a lot of reading of historical fiction to sort of get into that, learn more about that type of writing? Or is it not helpful doing that?
No, I've read more than I ever have in my life, I think, in the last year and a half. Not just historical fiction, but novels in general, just to build up my understanding of how plots are created, and to build up that vocab as well.
Well, we'll hear more about what perhaps might be headed to be the Māori Wolf Hall trilogy in a little while. But the reference to history made me want to talk to David about this, because actually all of you have got history to various degrees in your work. But David, that's a real interest of yours, isn't it? And I mean, and you seem to be wanting to light the fire of historical interest in young readers. Why is history such an area of interest for you?
I think there are two reasons, Paul. One's an admission of ineptitude on my part. I've found more and more that I'm out of touch with the language, the technology, even the ways of thinking of contemporary kids, if I can use the term. And I had two options. Either I could write fantasy, and the answer to that is that I can't, or I could look at topics, issues from the past. So to some extent, I rather, in a mercenary manner, as well as a wider manner, chose the historical topic, and I found them increasingly rewarding. I found that I can try and take issues from them, hope to make them relevant to contemporary readers, suggest that the dilemmas young people faced in the past are very much the same as they face today. So I've just found it increasingly rewarding and been appalled by my own ignorance of certain historical topics.
And What sort of feedback have you got from those readers that you're writing for? Because I know you've said that there's a bit of a struggle at the moment for reading and writing to be valued in such an inattentive, distracted time that we live in. But what feedback do you get when you sort of meet classrooms of students who've read your books?
You get three types of feedback, I think. First of all, you get the feedback which informs you that every one of them is going to be an author, something which I try desperately to discourage. You get the feedback which is a response to the individual book. And some of the questions they ask are extraordinarily perceptive, the why, the when, the what questions. And then you get the questions which show that, in fact, they are deeply committed to reading. It may not be reading as we know it, as I think Captain Kirk would have said, but it's reading perhaps on screens, it's reading of graphic novels, but it's reading which reassures me that there's a lot of very word-savvy and story-focused kids out in schools.
Which is brilliant when you think of growing the readership of the future. So now I think what we'll do is we'll hear from each of these esteemed writers who are all going to read an excerpt from their books. Don't forget to submit your questions in the comments. So we'll start with Anne. Anne Kennedy is an acclaimed poet, fiction writer, screenplay editor and teacher known for her innovative, ambitious writing. Her poetry awards include New Zealand Post Book Award for Poetry in 2013 for The Darling North, which is one of my all-time favorite New Zealand book titles. Anne has beautiful book titles. And also won the Montana New Zealand Book Award for Poetry 2004 for Sing Song. And most recently, she was shortlisted for the 2020 Auckland New Zealand Book Award for Poetry for her collection Moth Hour, which looks like this. The Sea Walks into a Wall. This book, published by Auckland University Press, is Anne's most recent book of poetry, and that was published in October 2021. Anne has also won the ICI Writers Award in 1989 for Musica Ficta, which was a novel, and the BNZ Catherine Mansfield Short Story Award in 1984 for Julesdale, which people may remember was also turned into a television film. Her novel, The Last Days of the National Costume, was shortlisted for the 2014 New Zealand Post Book Award for Fiction and made the IMPACT Dublin Award for Fiction Longlist in 2015. Anne's screen credits include the adaptation The Monkey's Mask and Crush, co-written with director Alison McLean. Anne has edited literary journals including Ika, Trout, Best New Zealand Poems, Jam and Landfall. She's taught fiction and screenwriting at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and at the Manukau Institute of Technology. Anne has appeared in a variety of festival roles both nationally and internationally and was distinguished visiting writer at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 2006. She was awarded the 1995 University of Auckland Literary Fellowship and was the 2014 Michael King Fellow at the University of Auckland. In 2016, Anne was writer-in-residence at the International Institute of Modern Letters at Victoria University of Wellington. And in 2017, attended the fall residency at the University of Iowa International Writers Program. Her 2018 novel, The Ice Shelf, published by Victoria University Press, was an eco-comedy that explored the dangers of wasting love and other non-renewable resources. Anne's other sector contributions include judging for the Auckland New Zealand Book Awards in the Poetry Award category and the National Schools Poetry Award, and project mentoring and assessing in the film industry, including for the New Zealand Film Commission. And Anne's going to be part of the New Zealand Festival of the Arts Writing Program in March 2022. Anne, ngā mihi, over to you.
Kia ora, Paul. Thank you. I'm going to read two poems, both quite short. The first one is new-ish, and it's called Reading the Money. When the books are gone, we will read the money. We'll watch the spangled ticker tape flutter towards oblivion and shop for bargains at the sale table of thought. When the books are gone, we'll research at the pulp and paper mill. We'll look up jokes on Huey Decimal in the frowsty light. At parties, we'll swing a bat at the piñata of knowledge and watch everyone swarm over the long grass. Reading the old storage room will be an emptiness. In summer, we'll swim in a river flowing yellow, then pink, with the dye of books and the dissolution of experience. In the streets, the glazed masks of shredded learning. We will forage at the car boot of democracy when the books are gone. We will read the money. The second poem is from the title poem from my new book, Sea Walks into a Wall. And this is the final section. It's a poem, and it's sort of a long poem, but this is just the last bit. You go down there and you, old sea wall, new sea wall. Old sea wall was a statue of a wall. It was warm and gritty. The air is rough and blue. Old sea wall was so blood and guts. It was tender, it was stone. It trembled with salt and light. The wall was the gateway to the sea. The wall was so grey, all night and all day. It kept storms at bay. On the beach, always an aftermath of a wedding, froth and a mess of ribbon and glass, a runway for lost souls returning, a regret. Tangaroa is like butter in the sun today. I love the wall. I pummel the wall. My hands are on the warm, grey, post-industrial wall. In the next storm, the sea will take the wall back into its real-time, moving, shining thing. My heart had a wall struck down in a storm. You didn't even need that wall at all. Kia ora.
Kia ora, and thank you for those readings. You know, as we know, you've been honoured in these awards for your poetry, but you've written in so many other areas, you know, film, fiction, screenplays and things. But where does poetry sit for you relative to that? I mean, what is it that you are only able to say through your poetry?
Yeah, I don't know. So, I mean, there is something that links the different things I do, and it's narrative, because I love story. And I sort of started out in fiction and film. And to be honest, I'm not really sure where poetry came from, but my main interest in poetry is telling a story, narrative poetry. But I guess if I was sort of pressed to say what it is, it's a sort of freedom that's available in poetry, but within parameters. So something I love about poetry is form. You know, it has form on the page. I'm a page poet. And I love the way poetry sort of looks and takes shape on the page and has boundaries, and you know, it can be skinny or fat or in big chunks or rhyme. There was these quite sort of formal forms, but within that there's enormous freedom. And I think that when the first book of poetry I ever wrote, Sing Song, I think that's the thing that I sort of realized I could do. There was this sort of freedom that I didn't quite feel in anything else I did.
And then in terms of that narrative then in your work, I mean, like a lot of other writers, you're responding to things that are important to you, that you're noticing going on in the world. And I'm conscious that we're all here having this discussion just sort of days after the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. Do you want to talk, Anne, about how the environmental changes feature in your work? And you've been looking at this for a while because the ice shelf was looking at that, but also, you know, in this latest book, there's the sea walks into a wall. There's a very sinister stream. I think it's sinister. Well, the stream is having a dialogue with people.
Yeah, but it's sinister what's going on. And with all the other problems that we have going on in the world at the moment, you know, this is the huge one. And so I feel like as a writer, I can't not respond to it. I guess I sort of struggle with thinking, what can I do apart from put the recycling out? But in the end, I do believe in the word and in sort of making a point. And so I think that's something I can do. So yeah, but I've always wanted to write about issues. I started off with feminism and have sort of moved my way through. And this one seems like this is the most urgent thing to write about now.
But also I was looking at, there's a beautiful essay, if people haven't seen it, at the end of Moth Hour, your previous book, which is this very intensely personal story to do with the loss of your brother in the early 1970s. But in the essay, you really talk about how it's important not to lose sight of hope. And I heard you say that in an interview on the radio about this as well. And we sort of need to hear that a bit at the moment, don't we? I mean, in spite of everything, it's really important to remain optimistic. Is that important in your work? Oh,
it's hugely important. I mean, I think that the arts are inherently hopeful, even if, even if you're writing or making something about something tough and depressing, there's something about expressing the emotion of a problem that leads to hope. We have to keep hoping. Otherwise, what do we have?
Talking about emotions, sorry, there was a bit of anger, that emotion in that first poem, Reading the Money. Do you want to tell us just quickly how that poem came about?
I think I'll just let the poem speak for itself.
Sure.
Which is sort of what I believe that poems do, or any kind of art. Because, otherwise you just write down your thoughts, raw. But the thing about making some art is that you try to sort of distill it and say something in a different way, and in a slightly different way from how you might have seen it expressed before. That's the thing for me anyway. That's what sort of drives me to keep doing this.
Well, that's something that I think of when I read all the work from all the writers this evening. So thank you very much, Anne, ngā mihi. Up next, we've got our non-fiction writer, Dame Claudia Orange. So Dame Claudia is one of New Zealand's most distinguished historians. After publishing her first award-winning history, the Treaty of Waitangi in 1987, which had a revised edition in 2011, she became general editor of the award-winning Dictionary of New Zealand Biography, released in 5 volumes, with the Māori biographies also in Te Reo Māori, released as Ngā Tangata Tai Matarau. A director of collections and research at the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongariro, for many years, she is currently a research associate at the museum. Dame Claudia has received many awards and honours for her contribution to a wider understanding of New Zealand history, which includes research for exhibitions at Waitangi's Te Konahu Museum and the He Tohu exhibition at the National Library here in Wellington. Claudia's most recent book, it's quite a biggie, this book here. The Treaty of Waitangi, to Treaty of Waitangi, an Illustrated History, published in 2021, is widely acclaimed. In the 1993 New Year's Honours, Dame Claudia was made an Officer of the Order of the British Empire for services to historical research. She was appointed as the Distinguished Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit, also for services to historical research, in the 2009 New Year's Honours. She accepted redesignation as a Dame Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit in August 2009, following the restoration of titular honours by the New Zealand government. In 2018, Claudia was made a Companion of the Royal Society, Te Apa Rangi, receiving their Po Aronui Award in recognition of her work to improve awareness, knowledge, and understanding of the Treaty of Waitangi, of New Zealand biography, and of the role of museums in communicating New Zealand's story. E te kahurangi, Claudia, tēnā koe, kia koe te wā.
Kia ora, Paul, and kia ora tātou katoa. As you know, the letters, reports, and diaries left by officials and missionaries provide quite a good record of the events of 5 and 6 February 1840. From early on the 5th, Maori groups began to arrive. The waters of the Bay of Islands came alive with waka converging from all directions, each with 30 or more paddlers keeping time to the stroke. Settlers' boats joined the stream, and the ships anchored offshore had all their flags flying. Summer showers had cleared and the day was brilliantly fine. Cicadas shrilled noisily. Outside the residency grounds, stalls were set up to sell refreshments: pork, cold roasts, pies, baskets of bread, and stout, ale, brandy and rum. Special provisions were ready for Maori guests: 1/2 ton of flour, 5 tons of potatoes, 30 pigs and other goods. On the lawn in front of the residency, officers of the Herald had erected a large marquee, 35 to 45 metres in length, was made of ship's sails and decorated with flags. A sergeant and 3 troopers of the New South Wales Mounted Police, who had arrived from Sydney on the Herald, paraded in their scarlet uniforms. Hundreds of Maori sat in groups, smoking and talking. Some had come long distances and carried guns. Little parties of Europeans strolled up and down. Officers from the Herald, missionaries, traders, sailors. The crowd buzzed with excitement in the gala atmosphere. It was an exciting time, I should imagine, for a lot of those present.
Kia ora, Claudia, thank you for that. Well, what an exciting time you've had with studying what that reading was all about, the lead up to the signing of the treaty in 1840. So as we know, that's been a major focus of your research. I went back and had a look at your PhD. So that's 1984, the Treaty of Waitangi, a study of its making, interpretation and role in New Zealand history. And when you look at the abstract for that thesis, it was talking about sort of challenging this proposition that New Zealanders thought that was pretty good and we could be quite proud of that internationally, but you kind of like looked underneath the image, and that's been really the story of so much of the work that you've done. But I mean, where are we at now? In 1987, there was the book came out. There was the State-Owned Enterprises Act had just been passed the previous year. Then there was that big Court of Appeal case, the Māori Council versus against the Attorney General. It was amazing timing, your book, but where do you think we're at now?
Well, it's hard to know, Paul. I think we've moved a great deal further. I think settlements have done an amazing job in gradually giving governance to iwi. It's going to take time. It also, of course, hasn't been without huge amount of criticism of the process involved and the policy of the government. But it is interesting if you think carefully that we're looking at 30 to 40 years of change that has been absolutely exceptional, really. In 1980s, people were questioning me as to why I should bother looking at the treaty at all. Surely people had said everything that had to be said about the treaty. And my answer was usually, well, I'm really interested in the treaty on the ground in New Zealand. What I hear is Maori voices are still not happy at all and quite dissatisfied with the way governments, one after the other, have handled Maori affairs, really, right from 1840. That's, of course, why I came back and started to challenge that myth of New Zealand had done very well by Maori. It seemed to me that that surely couldn't be entirely true. So I set out to start delving carefully and tracking through the many years when there was quite a consistent Maori voice. So that's really is what has driven me until now. And I think now we're really looking at what do we do after settlements are pretty much concluded. What's the relationship that our nation might have with Maori based on the promises made in 1840?
That's right. And in your final chapter in this latest edition of the Illustrated History of the Treaty, you talk about a desire expressed by Māori for true partnerships and genuine power sharing. Are you seeing examples of that emerge?
I think we are. And then the question arises as to where is it going to go and will the public at large feel comfortable with this? Many in the public, of course, have come through an education system that does not require the New Zealand history to be taught in schools. Some have done history, but only a very few in the sense of those who come through and worked in government and also have opinions, and quite strong ones, on where this country might go. So the big question still remains, how does one's writing make a difference to how people might think? From my point of view, I find that it's a great greatly rewarding when people come up to me out of the blue and just simply say, thank you for trying to make clearer what has gone on until now. And my hope is that I keep on writing and researching to endeavour to expand that understanding.
Well, I think your writing, Claudia, has made a huge difference into helping us think through things to do with the treaty, and thanks to those students at Otorohanga College. More students are going to be learning about history as part of the changes to the curriculum, and I'm sure your books are going to be a fantastic resource. Ngā mihi, thank you for that. Now, just a quick reminder to get your questions in so we can answer them after the readings, but now we're going to hear from David Hill, winner in the genre of fiction. David Hill is a prolific and highly regarded New Zealand writer, playwright, poet, columnist, and critic. Best known for his popular and award-winning body of work for young people, ranging from picture books to teenage fiction, he has published more than 40 titles, including See Ya Simon, Coming Back, Right Where It Hurts, and Take It Easy. David's novels have been published internationally and translated into several languages, and his short stories and plays for young people have been broadcast here and overseas. His first novel for teenagers, See Ya Simon, published in 1992, about a boy with muscular dystrophy, was shortlisted for major awards in New Zealand and the United Kingdom, and it won the 1994 Times Educational Supplement Award for Special Needs. Enduringly popular and still used as a class text in high schools all over New Zealand, See Ya Simon was awarded the Storylines Galen Gordon Award for a much-loved book in 2002. In recent years, David has also produced a widely acclaimed series of picture book biographies of famous New Zealanders for young children, in collaboration with illustrator Phoebe Morris, including one called Taking the Lead, which is about Jacinda Kate Laurel Ardern, the current holder of the office these literary awards are named after. Alongside his many writing projects, David regularly visits schools, leads professional development for teachers, mentors new and emerging writers, and tutors creative writing. In 2003, David was the Robert Lord Writer-in-Residence in Dunedin, and in 2010 attended the International Writers Program at the University of Iowa. In 2013, My Brother's War won the Junior Fiction Award at the New Zealand Post Children's Book Awards and also the Children's Choice Award in that category. In 2019, as I mentioned, David was announced as the 2019-2020 New Zealand Society of Authors President of Honour, bestowed in recognition of his contribution to writing and writers in the literary arts sector in New Zealand. In 2004, David was made a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit, and in 2005, he was awarded the Storylines Margaret Mahi Medal, acknowledging his significant contribution to children's literature in New Zealand. David, kia ora, over to you.
Kia ora, Paul. I'd like to read from one of my young adult novels called Enemy Camp. Enemy Camp is the story of a 12-year-old boy, Ewan, whose father is a guard at the Featherston prisoner of war camp in World War II. Ewan and his mates have come to admire a Japanese officer called Lieutenant Ito, but tensions are building at the camp and confrontation looms. A single shot. Was it the colonel? I couldn't tell. Our sensei staggered, seemed to clutch at his arm. Then he disappeared as the madness began. The military prisoners surged towards the concrete slab where the New Zealand officers stood. More stones arced through the air. One hit Captain Ashton, who doubled over, holding his ribs and half falling. The colonel bawled orders, but nothing could be heard above the din. A second shot and a prisoner fell. A third shot. Bursts of them suddenly from everywhere. The concrete slab, the hut roofs, the watchtowers. Not just rifles, machine guns and Tommy guns splitting the air with their noise. All across the open ground, prisoners screamed and fell. Some lay still, some twitched and twisted on the ground. Some huddled, arms over their heads. Others still charged or staggered towards the guards. More shots, and down they went. Guards swore and yelled as they fired. Prisoners were trying to escape now, running or limping towards their huts. A gun fired. careful, aimed shots, and 3 of them fell too. One guard threw up his arms and collapsed. Hit by what? A whistle shrilled. Someone bawled, "Cease fire, cease fire." The shots kept on. Men ran and screamed and fell and moaned. Where was Ito? Was he dead with his men? Other voices yelled, close by. Our voices screaming, "No, stop, no." Clary was crying, hugging himself, bent over. Still more shots. The whistle blasted again. The guns stopped. As suddenly as they had begun, they stopped. No more firing, only someone shouting orders, desperately, hopelessly, while screams and moans still rose. And someone calling our names. My dad, rushing towards us, his face shocked and disbelieving, grabbing the 3 of us, dragging us back behind the hut, gasping, "Ewan, boys," over and over again, while from the military compound where our sensei had fallen, the terrible wailing went on.
Elder David, thank you for that. We've talked already about the place of history in your writing, but I was wanting maybe to talk about these narrators who find themselves in these historical settings. Now, your book, See Simon, which I've already talked about, that's just had its 29th birthday, and it is one of your best-known works. You've said that Nathan, the narrator character in that book, is the template for every young adult and children's novel that you've written since. What's that character like?
First of all, Paul, I must apologise for the background noise. My printer has chosen this moment to start cleaning itself, hence the rumbling and growling you may hear. Yes, I sometimes say that what I like to do is to take an ordinary person, usually a male, because I'm a little better at trying to understand their psychology, and put the ordinary person in extraordinary circumstances, whether it's the death of a friend, having to watch the shooting of a group of prisoners, being trapped in a situation which puts them in physical extremis. I just like almost that formulaic relationship between relatively ordinary protagonist and, as I say, extraordinary situation.
And things like the coast watchers in the Second World War that the students of today may not know about if they don't have a connection to that. I mean, that's a particular part of the New Zealand experience of that war. It's sort of letting them know about things that you're more familiar with than they might have been. What feedback do you get from students? I mean, you're pretty well placed to be sort of meeting young people and listening to them and where they're at and what their concerns are. I mean, I guess they're different in a lot of ways to you when you were growing up in Napier, but what differences do you see, or are there some things that don't change?
One of the things I must say is that trying to write history has given me an even more profound admiration for Claudia and her work. But I found that even if the topic and its contents are not very well known to students, they're tremendously interested in each aspect of history, it seems. The events may be unfamiliar to them, but their interest, especially in what happens to persons of their age in such situations, remains constant all the way through. I'm always delighted and encouraged by the sheer vitality and the sheer energy of most young people when it comes to listening to stories and reacting to them. And Paul, I think that remains, and I hope will remain, always the same.
I remember reading a couple of memoir pieces you wrote in The Listener about growing up in Napier and how there were all these women, Miss So-and-so, who were teaching you or in the community because they'd lost their fiancés, their partners in the war. And that's a particular sort of experience. But, you know, I wonder if there is still a thing called The Listener and it's still publishing memoir pieces in 50 years, what people will be remembering from their time now. Probably a pandemic, I suppose, or things to do with that. But it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to see what they remember from their time as they're having the significance that you did from your time.
Yes, I was thinking of Anne's wonderful poems about the effect of, if you like, climate change, the effects on the environment. And I think as well as the pandemic, of course, the threat to the planet, which has galvanized so many young people. I mean, look at the protesters in Glasgow and elsewhere, led often by the young. And as well as their energy, it's the idealism of young people that makes them so rewarding to write for, Paul. And I do count myself fortunate to have specialised, I guess, in that sort of genre.
Mm. And lastly then, David, I mean, you've said, I've heard you say that you'd really like to see writers and writing demythologized and not seen as living lives detached from the rest of society, although I can kind of think of a few writers who might disagree with you. But how do you think these awards fit in with that vision? Because it's certainly putting the spotlight on people in their careers.
Morris G, when he won his first major award, told people he would use it to pay off the mortgage. A lot of people were shocked to think that writers had mortgages. I've been making a point rather tediously of telling people we're going to get the house painted. I just think it's important to remind people that we're part of the community. We become furious when Australia beats us at cricket. We rejoice when we see New Zealanders doing well, and we find so much in our community like everyone else. That's of personal and general interest. I like to be part of the neighbourhood. Mr. Hill, the writer.
And his house that needs painting, but will no doubt get help assistance now. Kia ora, David. Thank you for that. Now, I'm going to hand over to our colleague Haniko Te Kurapa, who will introduce the final writer of the evening. Haniko, kia koe te wā.
Kia ora, Paul. He puke na maunga, he puke na wai. He puke na moana, he puke na tangata. He rangatira no roto I ōna iwi, o Ngati Porou, o Ngati Kahungunu, o Ngati Awa me Ngai Tai ki Tamaki. He pū kōrero he kai ako, he hoia, he kai tuhi tuhi. Dr. Monty Soutar has worked widely with iwi and Māori communities, and particularly while writing Ngā Tamatoa in 2008. He has been a teacher, soldier, and university lecturer, and has held a number of appointments on national advisory boards, including the Archives New Zealand Council, the Guardians of the Alexandra Turnbull Library, and the First World War Centenary Panel. From 2016 to 2020, as a senior historian with Manatu Taonga, Ministry for Culture and Heritage, he led a digital project on the Treaty of Waitangi settlements in New Zealand. His latest book, Whitiki, was published in 2019 and focused on Māori participation in the First World War. At present, Dr. Soutar is writing a series of novels about the impact of colonisation on Māori. Nā reira, e te rangatira, e te whatukura, ka whiua te rākau kia koe I tēnei wā, kei a koe.
Nā koe, Haniko. Well, this is taken from coming to the end of the first novel, a chapter from the novel, and it's a scene at the end of a battle. Time slowed down as Tāwai was tortured by the sight and sound of these sons of wild beasts, dismembering his kin and preparing their corpses for the cooking ovens. Rage flowed through him like molten lava. He would rather have died a gruesome death fighting than endure this. As soon as the sun set, he put his plan into action. He crawled like a centipede out from the bodies that had hidden him all afternoon. Once he started running, he didn't look back. Moon will be out soon, Ta. Head for cover. Run as fast as you can, and no matter what, don't stop. He dashed towards the trees, his splayed toes feeling the sandy grit squeeze between them. He could hear a distant commotion. Have they spotted me? Seized by fear, he raced into the trees, not daring to look behind, stumbling, slipping, and tripping, barely able to see his way forward. Deeper and deeper into the forest, he plunged, breaking twigs, pushing aside branches. All the while, his heart was thumping and his lungs howling. He paused only for a second here and there to gasp for breath. Then on he ploughed again. Tāwai eventually staggered into a waterway, which he calculated must be the Karaka stream, about halfway back to what had been their starting point that morning. He remembered crossing, where it spilled out onto the plains. Dropping to one knee, his head and shoulders dripping with sweat, he gulped at the water from his cupped hand as he scanned the surrounding forest in terror. Every one of his senses was heightened. Even the breeze on his skin felt like a tempest. On and on Tāwai ran well into the night until his muscles ached and exhaustion finally overwhelmed him. Unable to take another step, he lay down on the forest floor under a low tree canopy to rest. He strained to listen for any evidence of his pursuers. Desperate to stay alert, but sleep soon consumed him. Even the mosquitoes could not rouse him now.
Ngā mihi, kia ora. Thank you for that, Monty. Now, as you said earlier, you've made a bit of progress in this hugely ambitious project. But this is from a particular place, isn't it? It's from where you're from, and it's about bringing the traditions and stories from where you're from alive for a new generation. That's right, isn't it? It's got a particular location, or are these completely fictionalized characters?
No, I decided that if it's historical fiction, that if I was going to base it anywhere, I should base it in my own area and on my own family. So I've basically gone 9 generations back in time to probably about 1725, if I had to date it. And it's the story of the settling and colonisation of New Zealand through the eyes of this Māori family.
This has never really been tried before. Have you shown what you've written to any readers, people close to you? Have you had feedback so far about what you've been working on?
Yes, I've got a number of people reading it, and I'm really keen to get authenticity in the novel. It's, we are talking about this first novel is, although it does come up to the period when Captain Cook arrives, we're taking people back into a world that I don't think anybody really appreciates these days. And I've got to test what I'm writing with other people who would have some understanding of what the past was like. It's based a lot on our oral traditions and some written manuscripts, court minute books that were recorded in the 19th century. But at the end of the day, it's a true story, and which has made me very careful. I've changed all the names. I don't want to offend my own relatives or the tribes that I'm talking about. So, people won't actually know unless they've had some experience in oral traditions and history who I'm talking about.
So has it been really strange moving from that world of military history and treaty history and online history and, the sort of academy history and moving into this whole other area, or have you enjoyed it?
Well, people probably don't realise I've written a lot on tribal history prior to writing about the military books that I've put out, but they have been published only in the tribal circles. They circulate in that area, and so I'm drawing a lot from that material that I wrote back in the 1980s now. So it's not like it's new to me, and I've been fortunate in being a historian most of my life. I know where to get the material and to how to put it all together. I think it's a rich story, and my whole motivation has been to educate New Zealanders first about the past. I don't think we really appreciate where we've come from, and also to educate Māori as well. I think of my own children, they've got no idea of their tipunas and what they did in the 19th, 18th century.
It's going to be fascinating. And you mentioned in an email prior to this event that it's kind of challenging writing in this time because there aren't the same opportunities to talk to other writers and be with other writers. I mean, we have just celebrated the Christchurch Word Festival. I mean, festivals and things are still happening. What do you think are some of the challenges of writing in this time when we're a bit isolated from each other? I mean, or do you think there are other alternatives for how you can get the kind of feedback and support that you'd normally get from writers?
You feel isolated. I mean, talking online or talking over email doesn't quite cut the mustard in terms of looking at a person in the eyes and trying to gauge what their real response to your writing is. I'm fortunate around here in Gisborne that I have some close relatives. I got my brother just a block over from me, and he reads and can pop around. And when we were in lockdown, he's householders in our bubble, so we were able to share ideas face to face. I would like to have been traveling and getting around the country and talking to more people, but it's just the strange world we're in at the moment, and looks like our future.
Kia ora, Monty. Thank you for that. It'll be good to check in as this project progresses. Now it's time to hear what everyone else wants to ask our panel, so just bear with me. Our first question is from Pauline Smith, and this is for you, David. Pauline says, I remember my children who are in their mid-30s coming home from school and telling me about a book that they were immersed in called See You Simon. They were so moved by the story. I was at Rakiura Half Moon Bay School last week, and here was See You Simon on the teacher's desk ready to share with the students. I think this is from Pauline, you've created a timeless book that young people of different generations can connect to. Do you have any thoughts about this? It's good we did talk about this a bit, David, but it certainly did strike a chord and continues to strike a chord.
I was saying to Sam from The Big Idea that I think you never know which of the things you've written are going to hang on for a while. I had quite a struggle writing See You Simon. It was rejected out of hand by the first publisher I sent it to. I was lucky enough to have it accepted by the wonderful Anne Mallinson. And I've often tried to understand myself why it should have gone on for so long. I was writing specifically about our daughter and about identifiable teenagers who were her friends, and that may have given it an extra impact. I did realize also that since it was a story about loss, about death and grief, I also needed to put lots of corny jokes in it, which may sound terribly mechanical, but I guess I realized early on that having this mixture, this breadth of moods would help. Paul, I don't know why it's lasted when other books that I privately thought were better have sunk like rocks. It's just one of the wonderful vagaries, I think, of publishing and writing.
Kia ora. Thanks for that, David. Next question is for Anne, and this is from Paul Lisi, who asks, with your experiences at both Manoa in Hawaii and at MIT here in New Zealand, are there many similarities and or differences in terms of the students you've taught over the years? So how did that experience of teaching in those two places compare?
Oh, wow, what a fascinating question. Thank you. Oh, gosh, that's huge. Well, Hawaii is, I guess the similarity is that we're all in the Pacific, you know, and that is much more sort of bonding thing than I had realized before I went to Hawaii. And so that's huge. So I felt like the students that I taught in Hawaii, and I sort of started teaching there. I taught a little bit here, but I really sort of cut my teeth there. So by the time I came back here, I was more experienced. But there were so many similarities, especially teaching in South Auckland, like being on Oahu and then going to South Auckland. I felt there was a really strong sort of similarity of like sort of community and kind of togetherness and friendliness in those places, which you don't see everywhere. But also an incredible awareness among young people of their history. It's been really interesting listening to David and Claudia talking about history. And I think that young people are just getting more and more educated about their own history. And Monty, of course, it was really interesting to hear that that's the, you know, that's one of the drives for your project, Monty. So I think that there are similarities in that way, that there are a generation of people who are growing up in a freer world in some ways, and a world with more information available, but also a really difficult world that, you know, there's a whole lot of sort of things going on. I don't know if that answers the question. That's a tough question.
It is a tough question,
but thank you for it. Yeah, it's really worth thinking about.
Kia ora, and thank you. Now, Claudia, I've got a question here for you from Nicholas Lowe, who says, how have reactions to your work changed over the years from the first edition of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1987 to that new illustrated edition published this year that we were talking about earlier?
The question that Nick is raising, though, is how attitudes have changed, perhaps, or how people's understanding, or both. I think if you look back to 1987, when the PhD rewritten came out, I think people realized that they were puzzled by what was going on with the Treaty, the Waitangi Tribunal's mandate having been extended back to look at claims coming through from 1840. So the book then satisfied, to some extent anyway, the question is, why are we suddenly looking at so many Maori issues, and why are they so much to the fore? I think now that's 1987. But if you look now at getting a book out on the treaty, I think you're looking at quite a different situation where people may feel they've heard a lot about the treaty, but at the end of the day, I realized that a very large number of people in the public right around the country still don't completely really understand some of the issues and some of the understandings that it would be much better if they had to really grasp some of the issues about Maori governance, the extent to which the country can look to Maori, as in fact increasingly it is. And that's probably what I've tried to convey in the recent book. And so it's a challenge still, I think, as things still keep rolling and things are moving quite fast now. That's going to be the challenge for people to take a deep breath and think through some of the issues that are arising and the questions that they raise.
Thank you. I've got a question now from Sandy Morrison for Monty. Monty, in your view, do you think Aotearoa New Zealand is ahead of the curve in the Western world discussing post-colonialism, moving Indigenous cultural views from the margins, and undertaking policies and actions to activate a post-colonial worldview in our institutions and education systems? What are your thoughts on that? From Sandy. Yeah, okay. I think you're on mute.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, short answer, we're behind. That was a long and complex question, but that really is the answer. I think next year will be interesting with the history curriculum changing, and all children going through the education system in New Zealand will have a better understanding about our past. The one problem I do have about the curriculum is that we've missed this whole period from the arrival of Māori up to the arrival of Europeans, and that's what my first book's about. Probably for that reason, we just don't touch on it. And I think that's as important to understanding where we are today. It's partly because of the colonial experience Māori have had, but it's also got to do with what happened in this period before Europeans arrived here. I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Kia ora, Monty. Claudia, Sandy was actually keen to hear your thoughts on that as well. Did you have thoughts about that, sort of moving away from that colonial period mentality, I think was what Sandy was talking about?
Yes, I think that we have gone a long way, but there is still a large number of the public who still get quite angsty about the whole area of Maori rights and the extent to which Maori appear to be enabled to get things that mightn't have been the case a while ago. Yes, and in a sense, I suppose we're starting to move faster into a post-colonial period in one sense, but I don't think that the battle is yet over, to be honest. And so we keep researching and writing, and there are still some major issues that need to be addressed, and some of them have been moved on quite quickly by the present government, but I think there are still others that are still waiting to be addressed. So again, I'd like to see people keep an open mind, open-mindedness. In some cases, they already are pretty open-minded, but there's still a sense or a feeling that they haven't quite got rid of, you know, and that's, so it's easy to say, well, yes, we've moved a long way, but people may look at the facts and the story, but there's still a feeling and a sense that they haven't yet perhaps sloughed off.
Mm. Kia ora. Thank you, Claudia. There's a question now from Jenny Nagel, which I'll address to David, and it's about looking at this other group that we're talking about that we need to acknowledge this evening, the publishers who help this work that you write appear. And Jenny's question is, what can writers and publishers do to help shift the dial on our children's literacy levels? It's a pretty foundational thing. David, what are your thoughts on this?
I think my first response, Paul, and kia ora, Jenny, is to emphasise that publishers and authors work together. I say this because a lot of people have the perception that it's publishers versus authors almost. But I think we're a cooperative, we're a partnership. I'm very impressed by the quality of work in terms of historical material, graphic novels that are making their way into schools. Graphic novels in particular have become very, very impressive pieces of work. I think obviously a dialogue between publishers and teachers, publishers and anyone who's trying to improve reading for young readers. And I'd like to know how many publishers actually employ young people from the ages, say, of 7 upwards to read manuscripts and comment on them. That could be maybe one small practical step.
That's an interesting thought, yeah. And I was just thinking back to something you said earlier. Are you relaxed about reading wherever that happens, you know, phones, tablets, devices, whatever, as well as books, as long as young people are reading? That's helping with that question that Jenny had about literacy, which kind of is the foundational thing that a lot of what we're celebrating tonight relies on.
I think our generation will always equate literacy with books, with printed books that you open. I'm realizing more and more that phones, computer screens can be a very valuable and quite complex aid to literacy. So I'll stick to the books, but I quite accept that for our younger people, other options are perfectly permissible and even admirable.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. And it will be interesting to find out whether readers' reports come from 10, 11, 12-year-olds from some of the publishing houses in this country. There's a question here for Monty from George Longhurst, and this was something I was curious about actually, but I wasn't sure whether to ask it because sometimes writers don't like this kind of question, but when is your trilogy coming out?
Expect that from George Longhurst. The first book is, well, the manuscript is almost finished with the first book, but it's coming out next year. I can't say when. That's the publisher's decision on when they put it out. And then, God willing, every year after that, the next 2.
Kia ora. And I was curious to ask you about, by the way, we've had some lovely feedback from Marianne Schultz, a scholar that I've worked with. Rowan, your work and words tonight are inspiring, and I look forward to what comes next. I think we were curious to ask you about, you know, writing in this time, being a writer, being a poet in this time of a health emergency. Is it good for writers or is it difficult for writers? I mean, when I've actually read interviews with a lot of you, some of you have said you found lockdowns easier, some of you said you found them hard. How's it been for you?
A bit of both. I mean, I've worked through most of it. I think it depends on your personal circumstances. So I've got my dog just deciding she wants to talk to me at the moment. Yeah, I think it's entirely personal. Like if you've got kids at home who you need to sort of, you know, shepherd through school and trying to work. And I think it must have been like incredibly hard for most people, actually. So for me personally, I've worked through most of it, but I also I sort of digest things slowly. So so I haven't sort of felt this, you know, direct kind of beaming down about sort of pandemic stuff and just sort of put it on the page. Although there is a little bit of it in my book, but I really admire people who are able to sort of write, you know, amazing, sort of brilliant personal essays about what was happening to them on lockdown, and I can't do that. But I do think it's something that will go on. I mean, it will resound into, you know, the next, you know, probably decades actually, and we don't even know how this is going to, how it's going to end up. So I think. Paul, you mentioned before, perhaps, you know, the listener in 50 years, what will they be talking about the pandemic? So I think that we just don't know, but I think we know that people will keep talking about this for years to come.
Kilda. Claudia, I wanted to ask you earlier, that beautiful reading where you used those sources to create that picture of what it was like there. Now, you're someone who's spent a lot of time in that special place. You've had a lot to do with the vision of that museum that's there. When you wrote that piece, does it sort of resonate with what the experience of being at Waitangi is like now? I mean, there are still waka at Waitangi. What I thought was interesting about your reading was that sense of separateness, that the Māori were there in groups and Pākehā were walking up and down, promenading. But do you sort of think there's still a sense of that when we go back to that special place now?
There's always at Waitangi a special sense that you're in a special place. There's no question about that. If there's still a gap between Maori and the tangata whenua there and those that come in, I think it's almost inevitable that you will find a gap. But then the more people that are accustomed to mixing more broadly and more widely and finding out about both the site and the experiences on site, then for many it's a joy to go to Waitangi and look at the museums that are established there. You know, they are really quite recent. I mean, the big one in 2016, the upgrade to the Treaty House itself, and then Te Aroha, which is a marvellous exhibition in a completely separate museum, again in the grounds. You know, those are places where people feel welcome. And I think that's the important thing with Waitangi. People are often a little cautious about going. They say, oh, I don't want to feel bad or guilty about the past. But that's not at all what Waitangi itself is like. It is a place where people feel quite rewarded for having taken the trouble to travel up and go. And it is quite a long way for people. My hope is that the greatest number of school children in the country at one time can go up there for that experience, particularly the 11 plus people, 11, 12, 13, 14. You know, there is a lot in those exhibitions that are presented in a different way. And again, in language that is at a level that they can quickly comprehend and relate to. And that's very important, and as David has talked about too, that it is something that can resound with them. And it's the visuals too, which are so important with an exhibition.
That's a fantastic vision, and I was there fairly recently, and I think it's a thing that we can all be proud of, and I agree with you. I hope that people do get the opportunity to visit. The reference to students leads on to our next question from Sean O'Brien, Phil Monty, and Sean asks, do you have any advice for how a Pākehā history teacher can appropriately navigate teaching Aotearoa New Zealand history in a secondary school with 70% Māori students? Oh, maybe this is coming from Te Tairāwhiti.
Yeah, I know it's challenging, and I know a lot of teachers are afraid of the curriculum next year, having to teach it. I know it was the same with the treaty education. You really have to, unfortunately, you have to upskill yourselves. I wouldn't, myself, I wouldn't be afraid. I'd be honest with students as to what you know, and make it a learning experience for both of you. I mean, I was a school teacher, and a primary school teacher at one point, and I always used to just keep ahead of the students by reading what I was teaching them a couple of days ahead. That's how desperate I was in those days, and I think it's pretty much going to be like that for a lot of teachers next year. It's going to be catch up for a few years.
And one of the things in that curriculum, though, is this emphasis on place-based history, which is kind of interesting and challenging. I sort of wonder how mana whenua around the country are going to cope with every school in their area asking them for help and advice. But I guess that's where libraries and museums and other institutions can help as well. But do you think that's going to be an interesting feature of that curriculum as we see it unfold?
I think that's exciting. When I was a school teacher, that's exactly what I did, because I taught in a little place called Ruatoria, and I found that the students couldn't relate to a lot of what we had to teach them in what was called the social studies curriculum back then. We were learning about things that happened in America and discoveries overseas. Yet outside our windows there were past sites that you know, the older teachers used to tell me about, and so they got involved. I mean, in Ruatoria we had the Victoria Cross, the Ngati one. We had Apirana Ngata, so it didn't make sense to be not, to me particularly, not to be teaching about those sorts of things. And I found that the community, the people who had that information were only too willing to share if you approached them, and they understood what it was for.
Hilda. David, there's a question for you from Asher, who's a young fan and loves your book First to the Top, and asked, did you ever meet Edmund Hillary?
Came geographically close to it because I live in New Plymouth, and during World War II, Edmund Hillary was based in New Plymouth and trained for fitness by riding his bicycle from the coastal airport to the base of Mount Taranaki, climbing to the top, trotting back down and riding his bike back to the airport again in a day. But I never had the pleasure of meeting the gentleman, unfortunately. But may I say, and I imagine Monty and Claudia and Anne can all relate to this, by the time you've read and researched everything you can about the topic, you feel you know these people. You have a vicarious, strong acquaintance with them.
David, what's the process for your books in terms of, do you have the idea or do your publishers have ideas? Or are you constantly sort of pitching ideas to your publishers, or do they come to you with suggestions about a setting for books for you?
For the picture books you mentioned earlier, Paul, the ones about eminent New Zealanders, the suggestions have come from the publishers. There's usually been a discussion on a shortlist, if you like, and then they have the final say. For most of my fiction, I've been the one who's tried to come up with the ideas. Occasionally, people have said to me, why don't you write about? And I imagine the other three folk here tonight have had that said to them. Mostly I say, thank you, what an interesting idea, and go away and ignore it. But a couple of times, suggestions have stuck with me. And to my surprise, I've ended up writing about something like the suggestion that was given to me.
Anne, there's a question here for you about whether you read your poems aloud, or do you like hearing others read your poems out loud?
Oh, good question, thank you. Oh no, I read everything out loud, fiction, poetry. Actually, before I commented about how I sort of love the page, the kind of shape of the page and everything for poetry, but it also is, sound is such an important element of poetry. It's vital. It's probably the first thing. Poetry is musical. So I read everything aloud. And I read fiction aloud as well. And I have always encouraged my students to do that. At home, I often say to my students, like, don't worry about your family. They can think you're crazy, but you still must do this. And also in a classroom situation, I think that's one of the strengths of the creative writing workshop, actually, is that people read everything out loud. So, yeah, thank you.
But at the same time, and you tell this as soon as you open one of your books of poetry, that, as you said, the arrangement of the words is very important to you. as well. So there's two things going on, certainly for your poetry.
Yeah, no, there's probably more than two actually. I think essentially it's to do with sound. And then you want to sort of get that down on the page, and then therefore it has a visual component. And actually, you know, for me, the sort of content or the message or whatever I'm trying to say comes last, even though deep down in my subconscious it was probably the first thing. But I started life doing music. That was what I first studied, and I played piano and everything. And that's what I wanted to do for years, and writing was second. But the reason it sort of percolated to the top is to actually sort of write down something concrete. So it is really all these things sort of percolating together.
Thank you.
Is it just going back to something that you mentioned before, Paul, about you know, how we all get through the pandemic? So I've been teaching piano online to little kids. I've sort of gone back to what I first did in life, and it's been really fascinating seeing these children actually flourish because they've got they're less distracted at home. I mean, it's still hard for them not going to school. It's really hard, but maybe they're a bit bored, and so piano lesson is like something to look forward to. But sort of flourishing in a creative way. And I'm not the only person to notice that. Like most of the teachers that I know have noticed that as well.
That's really interesting. And I mean, I've heard other bits of feedback about, you know, for example, Māori arts groups that are actually in a stronger position compared with a year, even though they haven't managed to meet in person. So I keep looking for these little upsides to this time we're living through, which is a way of, you know, looking out for that hope you mentioned before. I've got a question here from Philippa Weary for you, David. Huge congratulations from the children's writing community of New Zealand. We're so grateful for your ongoing generosity, encouragement, wisdom and humour. You mentioned some previous winners of these awards, and Philippa's mentioned that I said that we punch above our weight in our writing for children and young adults. Why do you think that is?
Kia ora, Philippa. I don't know. That is the most honest answer I can give. Perhaps it's because we have an education system which provides easy access for people to come and talk, to visit schools. Perhaps it's because we're still quite largely a suburban and a semi-rural society, which means that there's easy movement between families and households. I'm stumped for an answer, I'm sorry, Philippa. And Paul, perhaps there's good PhD material there.
It's just great that there's just so many great examples around, you know, the people, you know, Joy Carley and the others that you mentioned, that perhaps it's just because it's, and that's why you're having trouble. It's like asking a fish about water, because it is all around us. There are so many great examples we can... That's
right. And perhaps I could add to that point, of course, we have a strong children's writing community that encourages more children's writers, which of course continues the strength of the children's writing community. So it's a self-perpetuating and very pleasant state of affairs.
Kia ora, David. Thank you. Monty, I've talked a bit to Claudia about the treaty, but I just wanted to get your reflections on where we're at, given your experience working for Manatū Taonga on that Te Tai treaty settlement stories, which took you quite deeply into some of the stories of how the settlements are bedding in around the country. What are your thoughts about where we're at in that process that Claudia has studied so closely?
Well, I agree with Claudia. We've come a long way, a long way. I think what we haven't done, though, is and probably this has got to come out of government, is we haven't taught New Zealanders about what these treaty settlements are about. You know, you get reports that are produced for the Waitangi Tribunal, from the Waitangi Tribunal, that are given to government. Other than a small circle who read those, we don't make the best use of, I don't think, of those reports in turning them into some school resource that's easy to understand, so that the next generations can appreciate what this has all been about and what it relates to. I agree with Claudia. We've got a long way to go, but we have really come a long way. If you think back to probably when you and I were young, Paul, and the education system back then, it was a different world. I remember I came out of school and I remember being told you never get a job teaching Māori, all because you've got the language. And back then in 1980, I was coming out of school. That was the reality. How it's changed now.
And I remember Michael King saying that he always believed that people would use the Waitangi Tribunal reports as the basis for books, for documentaries and films and things. So I guess there's always that potential there. Claudia, perhaps could I just finish with you? I mean, the thing that always occurs to me when I think about your work and research and career is, how do you stay optimistic?
I suppose the thing that has made me optimistic is that a sense of purpose of still researching and writing. And I mean, one is gradually unpacking a history of the country. And it wasn't a history that I knew from my school years either, actually, Monty. I came out of school about 2 decades before you did, but I was just extremely lucky to have a 5th form teacher who was doing history at Auckland University, New Zealand history, and taught that in 5th form, 6th form. British history from 1200 onwards seemed to me to be boring. So, it's a funny world, really. Coming back, though, to what you asked me, Paul, sorry, and I've just lost that point.
Optimism. I mean,
optimism.
That always comes through when I listen to you talk about your research.
Well, one of the things that I suppose has certainly made me optimistic is the shift that has happened. It has been really quite dramatic. I mean, we have looked at successive governments. They have not been, nothing is perfect. But if you look at successive governments from the 1980s, or even earlier, if you look at the Act, the Treaty of Waitangi Act itself in 1975, and then the shift, that was really when I started the research on the treaty. It was amazing to see the land march crossing the harbour bridge, or being allowed to cross the harbour bridge, and arrive here in Wellington outside Parliament. Those were huge things at the time, and then they seemed to recede, but in a sense from the impact on the public. But if you think of it more consistently through, as some of my research has done, tracking it through, we have seen such major changes in the years that have addressed the settlements, and the settlements themselves, and the process and policy has not always been perfect. And the criticism by Maori is fair dinkum and fair and should be made. But we've still progressed. And I suppose it's that optimism that keeps me looking out to 2040. Where are we going with maybe 2030 to 2032, when the Governor-General of the time made sure that that whole area at Waitangi was given to the nation, to all of us. And of course, that has, raised the interest in us knowing more about it. So, there's still time to come and questions to be asked. But I feel optimistic that we are going to get there.
Hilda, thank you, Claudia. And yes, there was all that flurry of work in 1940, and you're right, we are heading towards these big deadlines. I did say that was the last question, but I thought of another last question. Anne, I was just going to leave the last word to poetry, and we've had a question about thinking about the future. What changes or shifts do you think are important or necessary in your respective fields? I mean, this is another terribly hard question, but what are your thoughts about poetry? It seems in Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's in pretty good heart at the moment. There's lots of courses, there's lots of journals, there's lots of publication going on. Is that right?
Yeah, there's so much going on. I think I mentioned that earlier. Actually, I remember a few years ago likening it to netball. It's like, Saturday morning, people are out doing netball, or they used to before the pandemic. But, like on any evening in Aotearoa, there are just so many poetry events going on, live, like Poetry Live, and so many journals, so much going on, so many courses. So I just think poetry is in incredible shape. But the best thing about it is that there are so many good, fantastic young poets coming through. I just, we've had great poets in Aotearoa for a long time, and there've been kind of golden years of them, but it just seems at the moment there are so many, and I could sort of reel off 10 names. I'm not going to, but I just think poetry is in really good hands, and it's partly to do with the support that's going on in all these ways. Some of them I just mentioned, and some monetary support from Creative New Zealand and other bodies, because poets can't live for nothing. They can't pay their houses unless they get some money. So I'm incredibly hopeful about how poetry is now, and the reason we need it is because it makes us look at a different way, and it's something that we that might have been sort of in the back of our mind and sort of wondering about. And if we read the words of a poet who's really managed to kind of distill an idea, an image, some kind of thought onto the page, it keeps us going, and it keeps us thinking, and it keeps us being an activist in the end.
Kia ora, thank you. Lovely point to end on. I've just got a couple of closing comments from a colleague, Annette Moru, who Anne is amazing as a writer and a tutor. I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to learn from her at MIT when the Creative Writing School was running. And I think of her teachings often in my mahi, alongside being a powerhouse writer in her own right. She has done so much to support and uplift so many brown writers from South Auckland and more, so well deserved. So that's from Anahira. There's a comment from Pauline Smith. I feel like I've had dinner with literary royalty. Thank you, Creative New Zealand, Auckland Live and Big Idea, Dame Claudia and David and Monty, an absolute highlight of 2021. My colleague Elizabeth Jones from the National Library, ngā mihi nui to the very talented writers, DNZ, and me. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing with us tonight. And Rosetta Allen, thank you all so very much for your contribution and generosity to the writing community and to the wider cultural needs of Aotearoa. Congratulations on your awards, well deserved. So we did receive so many lovely comments online from the audience. Unfortunately, we couldn't read them all, but we will share them later with our panelists. So, koutou rā, ko mau te wehi, koutou mā, what a rich conversation. I feel very honoured to have been part of this evening and to be in such special company. Thank you to all of us who joined us virtually and to those who took time to submit your questions. It's also been wonderful having NZ Platform NZ interpreting with us this evening. Thank you both, Kelly and Josh. Sorry I spoke too fast. And lastly, thank you to the wonderful folks at Auckland Live and Creative New Zealand for making this all happen and doing the behind the scenes magic. And now I'm going to hand back over to our colleague Haniko, who will close our session. Pō Mārie kia koutou katoa, Haniko, kia koe te wā. Kia ora.
Kia ora pō. E tautoko anei nā kōrero a pō ki nā kaiwhiwhi mo te pō nei rā te mihi. Nā rau o huia, nā rau kura o te ao tuwhi kei te mihi. Ka hoki anō au ki taua kōrero rā, tukuna o kupu kia rere ki te ao. Kia kapohia, kia rangohia, hei kai mā te tini, mā te manu. Nā reira tēnā koutou, ki te huna mātakitaki mai, ko te wawata I ki o koutou kite I nā kōrero a te huna nei. Nā reira tēnā tātou, kia whakakapi tō tātou pō ki te karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapapau nā mu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I tēnei pō. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa, tūturu o whitika whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e hui e, tā ki e.